"Did you come to fix the network?" she said, leaning against the doorframe in that black dress, "or is there something else you'd like to debug?" I looked at her once. Slowly. "The network can wait." She smiled, just barely. "Good answer." She pushed off the doorframe and walked past me close enough that I caught cedar and trouble in equal measure. "Before we begin, has someone ever walked into your life looking like a problem you actually wanted to solve? Drop it in the comments, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. My name is Remy Dahl, and I fix things for a living. Not in the sentimental way people mean when they say that about a therapist or a preacher. I mean literally, broken code, fractured networks, corrupted systems, compromised data. I spent 4 years at a defense contractor outside of D.C., doing security architecture before I decided I liked working in my socks too much to keep wearing a badge. Now I consult independently, mostly for mid-sized firms who discover, usually at the worst possible moment, that their digital infrastructure is one phishing link away from catastrophe. I'm good at what I do. I'm better at keeping quiet about it. I'm telling you this because what happened that May, the whole strange, tilting sequence of it, started the way the best and worst things in my life always seem to start, with me on someone else's floor, doing someone else a favor, and noticing something I wasn't supposed to notice. Cal's apartment is on the 4th floor of a converted brownstone in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. It smells like old wood and takeout containers and the specific brand of mild chaos that follows a 31-year-old man who works 60 hours a week and cleans approximately never. We've been friends since freshman year at NYU. Cal studied finance, I studied computer science, and we stayed close the way people do when they've seen each other at their lowest and didn't flinch. He called me that Thursday evening with a simple ask. His gaming rig had been throwing GPU errors for a week. He'd already ordered the replacement card. Could I come install it? I said yes. I always say yes to Cal. The windows were open to let in the May air, warm and soft and carrying the faint sweetness of whatever was blooming in the courtyard below. I was cross-legged on his living room floor, his tower case open in front of me, his old card in a static bag beside me. My laptop sat open 2 feet away, running a passive network scan out of habit, the same way other people leave music on in the background. It's not paranoia, exactly. It's pattern recognition. You spend long enough watching systems, you start noticing when something is off. The Bluetooth signal was off. It appeared in the top right corner of my monitoring interface as a red flag, not a warning I'd set manually, but an automated anomaly alert triggered by the signal's behavior. It wasn't just nearby. It was probing. Pushing hard and methodically against the router, testing access points with a persistence that wasn't accidental. Someone directly outside the apartment door was running an intrusion attempt on Cal's home network. Not a sophisticated one. But deliberate. I set down the thermal paste I was holding. Then I heard the voice. Low. Male. That particular flavor of controlled anger that's actually the opposite of controlled, the kind where the person is squeezing it hard to keep it from exploding. The words came through the door in pieces. Just listen to me, Viv, I'm not asking, you know what I have. I was at the door before I'd made a conscious decision to move. I stepped into the hallway and processed the scene in about 2 seconds. A woman, blonde hair, dark coat, laptop bag over one shoulder, posture locked into stillness like someone trying not to give ground, pressed back against the wall next to Cal's door. And a man, maybe my height but broader, phone in hand, close enough that she had nowhere comfortable to look. He hadn't touched her. The threat he was using didn't require it. His name, I would learn, was Stellan. But in that moment he was just an obstacle, and obstacles are something I know how to handle. Hey. I kept my voice easy. Stepped into the space between them without hurrying, the way you approach a system you're about to shut down, calm and deliberate. You should know I've been running a network scan in there for the last 20 minutes. Your device ID is already in my logs. So is the intrusion attempt. I tilted my head slightly. I have a contact at NYPD Cyber Crimes who is genuinely delighted by things like this. I watched his confidence go through 3 phases: resistance, calculation, collapse. He shoved the phone in his pocket. Said something under his breath that I didn't catch and didn't need to. And then he walked, fast, toward the stairwell. I turned to her. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't read, not quite relief, not quite suspicion. Something in between. "He's bluffing about more than you think," she said, before I could speak. "He has a dead man switch. Automated release. If I go to the police or tell anyone at my firm, everything goes live." She turned her phone screen toward me. "An email. Automated trigger, cloud scheduled, tied to a private file server." I looked at the email. I looked at her. I took out my own phone. "Forward that to this address," I said, "and read her a burner I keep for exactly this kind of situation. And photograph the screen before you do." She did both. Her hands were steady. I noticed that. I held Cal's door open. "Come inside," I said. "Turn off your phone. We'll start from the beginning." She looked at me for a moment, those sharp eyes measuring something I hoped I passed, and then she walked through the door. That is how it started. She told me her name was Vivian Marceau. She told me this the way people state facts under pressure: clipped, efficient, no softness around the edges. She worked in PR strategy at a mid-size firm in Midtown, specialized in corporate reputation management, which I found quietly ironic given the circumstances. She'd dated Stellan for 6 months the previous year. Lived with him for 4 of those. Left when she figured out what he was, not dramatically, she said, not with screaming or thrown things, just a Tuesday morning when she packed a bag while he was at the gym and didn't come back. She thought that was the end of it. She was wrong. Cal took the news about his sister with characteristic restraint, which is to say he sat very still on his couch for about 45 seconds and then said, quietly, that he was going to kill Stellan. I told him that would be counterproductive. He said he knew. He poured 3 glasses of whiskey anyway. Vivian didn't touch hers. She asked for chamomile tea instead. I noted that. She started coming to my loft in Gowanus the following evening. And the one after that. It wasn't planned, exactly. The first time she showed up she said she couldn't concentrate at her own apartment knowing her phone had been compromised. That was true. But she kept coming even after I'd swept the Mirror app from her device, found and disabled the cloned access, and set up a clean secondary phone for anything sensitive. She brought Thai food in paper bags. She sat on the old couch with her heels off and her feet tucked under her and watched me work. 3 monitors. May light going gold and then purple through the west-facing windows. The city making its city sound 6 floors below. I found the Mirror app on day 2, buried 4 layers deep in a system process disguised as a battery optimization tool. Sophisticated enough that most people never would have found it. Not sophisticated enough to fool me. I removed it cleanly and documented everything: installation timestamp, data extraction logs, the IP addresses it had been phoning home to. A server in New Jersey. Residential registered address, which meant a private setup, which meant Stellan had either built this himself or paid someone good to do it for him. Either way, he'd been watching her for months after she left. Reading her emails. Listening through the microphone when the app was active. I didn't tell her the microphone part until I'd already confirmed the access had been cut. Some information lands better when the danger is past. She took it the way she took most things, still, first, and then with questions. Precise ones. She asked about the data retention policy of the New Jersey server. She asked how difficult it would be to access remotely. She asked, carefully, whether there was any way to know exactly what he had. I told her what I suspected. Enough to hurt her professionally. Maybe personally. She nodded once and then went to the kitchen and poured the whiskey she'd declined the first night. I learned her, in those evenings, the way you learn a system you're trying to protect, by watching how it responds under pressure. She drank chamomile when she was anxious, sitting with the mug held in both hands, asking questions until she fully understood whatever she was being told. She drank whiskey when she was furious, quiet and straight-backed and precise. She noticed when I'd been working too long without eating and left food at the edge of my desk without comment, which was more consideration than most people who know me well have ever managed. One night, 10 days before the charity gala her firm was hosting at the Metropolitan Museum, the event Stellan had specifically threatened to detonate his files before, she was sitting close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of her coat. She looked at me for a moment the way she sometimes did when she was figuring out whether she trusted something. Then she reached out and touched my face. Just briefly. Like she was confirming I was real. I turned my head and pressed a slow kiss into her palm. "I've got you," I said. She didn't answer. But she didn't move away either. I turned back to the screen and told her what I'd been building, a false identity, a fictional PR broker named Mr. Vane, willing to pay $50,000 for the files Stellan was holding. Bait. Clean and simple and calibrated exactly to what I knew about him. "He'll respond fast," I said. "Men like that always do." She looked at the screen. At the profile I'd built, photo, LinkedIn, 2 years of fabricated digital history. "How do you know what men like that do?" she asked. "Because they think they've already won," I said. "And winning makes people careless." She was quiet for a moment. "Then, what happens if he doesn't take the bait?" "He will. But if he doesn't?" I looked at her. "Then we find another way. I don't stop until the problem is solved." She held my gaze for a long moment. Outside, a late rain had finally broken after days of gray, drumming softly against the windows, and the loft smelled like wet city and chamomile and the particular stillness that falls when two people are on the edge of something they haven't named yet. The night before the sting, she crossed the room and kissed me. Not carefully. Not tentatively. The way you move when you've been holding something back long enough that holding back stops being an option. I kissed her back. Everything we'd been carrying through 10 evenings of Thai food and whiskey and 3 monitors and clothes, careful work, finally let loose. Outside, the May rain fell. Stellan responded in 47 minutes. I know the exact number because I was watching the inbox when the notification came in, Vivian asleep on the couch behind me under the blanket she'd started leaving folded on the armrest like it belonged there. The message was exactly what I expected, cautious on the surface, hungry underneath. He wanted proof of funds. He wanted a meeting. He wanted to know how Mr. Vane had found him. I typed back in the voice I'd spent 3 days constructing, slightly arrogant, slightly careless, the particular register of a man who has more money than patience. I told him a mutual contact had mentioned his situation. I told him I dealt in sensitive corporate material exclusively. I told him I could have a cashier's check in his hands within 72 hours, provided the product was verified. He bit. I sat back and looked at the ceiling and let myself feel, for exactly 1 moment, the satisfaction of a system working the way it was designed to. Then I closed the laptop and went to sleep in the chair. There's a thing that happens during an operation, and I use that word deliberately, because that is what this had become, where the days leading up to the close start moving differently. Faster and slower at once. You're running on less sleep than you should be, checking variables you've already checked, looking for the error you might have missed. It's not anxiety, exactly. It's precision sharpening itself. The next 3 days had that quality. Vivian went to work each morning in her heels and her composed expression and her clean secondary phone, and I worked the sting from the loft. I built out Mr. Vane's digital paper trail another layer deep, a Shell LLC registered in Delaware, a business address in Midtown, a brief and unflattering profile in a trade publication I'd fabricated using a defunct industry blog's domain. When Stellan searched the name, which I knew he would, he'd find enough texture to satisfy a cautious man and not so much that it felt constructed. He searched on day 2. His IP resolved to a coffee shop in Hoboken. I logged it. On day 3 he sent a contract, his own, drafted poorly, full of language designed to insulate him legally while exposing the buyer. I read it twice, made 3 small changes that looked like concessions but were actually the mechanisms I needed, and sent it back signed with a notarized signature I generated through a legitimate document service under the LLC's name. One of those 3 changes was an access sharing clause buried in the asset verification section. Phrased in the kind of dense legal language that a man in a hurry, who thinks he's already winning, schemes rather than reads. It authorized Mr. Vane's technical representative to perform a remote integrity check on the files before payment cleared. Stellan signed it in under 2 hours. I called the number I had for a woman named Dara, who used to work in my D.C. days and now ran her own quiet firm doing exactly the kind of thing I occasionally needed done. She accessed the New Jersey server through the clause Stellan had just legally signed. She didn't delete anything yet, that would come later, and it would come clean. She just mapped it. Every file. Every folder. Every timestamp. It was worse than I'd told Vivian. I sat with that for an evening, working out how to say it. She came in around 7 with pad CEW and that particular alertness in her face that meant she already knew something had shifted. She poured whiskey without asking, 2 glasses, this time, and sat across from me at the desk. "Tell me," she said. So I told her. The photos were there, more than she'd known about. The merger emails. But also 14 months of intercepted messages, texts, voice notes, drafts she'd never sent. A folder labeled with her name in a way that made my jaw tighten when I saw it. He hadn't just been building leverage. He'd been collecting her. Archiving her, without her knowledge, for over a year. She didn't cry. She looked at the desk for a long moment, then looked up. "Can you take it all?" she asked. "After the meeting," I said. "Once he's handed over access credentials in front of witnesses, or what he thinks are witnesses, Dara goes back in and wipes the server completely. Forensic clean. Nothing recoverable." She nodded. "And the dead man's switch? Already neutralized." The automated trigger was tied to a scheduler app on his phone. "I killed the authentication token 4 days ago. He doesn't know it's dead yet." She looked at me steadily. "You've been 1 step ahead of him this whole time. That's the job." "No." She shook her head slightly. "That's you." I didn't have a good answer for that. I picked up my whiskey glass instead. She reached across the desk and covered my hand with hers. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Outside the window, May had turned the air thick and golden with late spring, and the city moved below us the way it always does, indifferent to everything except its own momentum. 2 days until the meeting. 1 day until the gala. Everything was in place. I told myself that was enough to feel certain about. I almost believed it. The coffee shop was my choice. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, a single entrance, sightlines to the street in both directions. A corner table that put my back to the wall and Stellan's back to the door. I arrived 40 minutes early, ordered a black coffee I didn't drink, and sat with my folder and my phone and the particular stillness that comes when you've done the preparation and there's nothing left to do but wait for the world to catch up with the plan. I had 1 earpiece in. Dara on the line, parked 2 blocks away with a laptop and a clean VPN. Vivian was in a cab somewhere south of 34th Street, waiting for my signal. 2 plainclothes officers from NYPD's Cyber Crimes Unit, the real ones, not the bluff I'd run on Stellan in Cal's hallway 3 weeks ago, were outside on the sidewalk in the May sunshine, reading their phones with the practiced boredom of people pretending not to work. It had taken me 4 days to get the detectives involved. Not because the case was thin, it wasn't, not anymore, but because the dead man's switch, even neutralized, made everything delicate. I'd gone in with the full packet, network logs, the mirror app documentation, IP records, the contract Stellan had signed, and a 40-page timeline Dara had helped me compile. The detective I met with, a compact woman named Reyes who looked like she'd heard every version of every story, read through it without expression and then said it was the cleanest pre-arrest documentation she'd seen from a civilian source. I took that as a compliment. Stellan walked in at 2 minutes past noon. He was wearing a suit that was trying too hard, shiny fabric, wide lapels, and carrying the particular expression of a man who believes he has significant leverage. He scanned the room, found me, and crossed to the table with his chin slightly elevated. He didn't recognize me at first. I'd worn glasses and a jacket I don't normally own, and people see what they expect to see. He was expecting Mr. Vane. He sat down. He looked at me. Something shifted behind his eyes. "You're not," he started. "I'm not." I slid the folder across the table before he could stand. "Sit down, Stellan. I'm only going to say this once." He sat. "Habit, maybe. Or the folder. People who've been building leverage instinctively want to know what the other side has." I told him, quietly and without theater, what was in front of him. Network logs showing 14 months of unauthorized device access. Timestamps from the Mirror app installation, traceable to a specific afternoon when Vivian had left her phone charging in their apartment and gone to the gym. IP records tying his home router to the New Jersey server. The contract he'd signed as himself, with his real signature, authorizing access to files he'd obtained through criminal means. And, as of 40 minutes ago, confirmation from Dara that the server had been wiped using the credentials he'd handed over in that same contract, legally, technically, completely. The leverage was gone. He stared at the folder. Then at me. His jaw was doing something complicated. "You can't prove." "I already did," I said. "To the detectives outside." I watched him decide, in real time, whether to run. I could see it moving through him, the calculation, the odds, the exits. I'd positioned him with his back to the door specifically for this moment. By the time he'd worked out the geometry, Vivian was already walking through it. She wore a sharp red suit, her blonde hair pulled back clean, and she moved through that coffee shop the way she moved through every room I'd watched her navigate, like she had already decided how it ended. She set a document in front of Stellan without looking at him and addressed his left ear. "That's the restraining order," she said. "The civil filing happened at 9 this morning. My lawyers were very efficient." Stellan pushed back his chair. He made it to the door in about 4 seconds. The officers on the sidewalk, to their credit, gave him just enough room to feel like he was moving freely before they didn't. I stayed at the table. I finished my cold coffee. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, in the bright midtown May light, I watched Stellan's shiny suit go very still between two people in plain clothes, and felt something I don't experience often enough, the specific quiet of a problem that has been fully, cleanly solved. Vivian came back to the table and sat across from me. She looked out the window for a moment. Then she looked at me. "Is it over?" she asked. "The hard part," I said. She nodded slowly. Something in her face was loosening, not breaking, just releasing, like a system coming offline after a long run. She'd been carrying this for months before she ever appeared in Cal's hallway. The stillness, the steady hands, the chamomile and the questions, all of it had been the shape of someone managing something heavy alone. She didn't have to do that anymore. "There's still the gala tonight," she said, and the corner of her mouth moved in a way I'd learned to recognize as the version of a smile she allowed herself in public. "I know," I said. "I own a tux." She raised an eyebrow. "Does it fit?" "Mostly." She laughed, genuinely, briefly, the version she didn't manage or measure. It was the best sound I'd heard in 3 weeks. Outside, the May afternoon held its warmth against the glass, and the city moved on around us, indifferent as always, and I thought, not yet over. But close. Close enough. The tux fit fine. I want to be clear about that because Vivian spent the entire cab ride to the Metropolitan Museum with one eyebrow slightly raised, prepared, I think, to be proven right. She was wearing black, a dress that moved when she moved, fluid and precise, exactly like her. Her blonde hair was up, a few pieces loose at her jaw. She looked like someone who had won something today and wasn't going to say so out loud. The gala was everything I expected and nothing I'm naturally comfortable with, a high-ceilinged hall full of important people performing ease at each other, waiters moving through with champagne on trays, the kind of ambient wealth that hums just below the frequency of conversation. Vivian's firm had organized it. It was her room in every practical sense. She'd built the guest list, managed the sponsors, coordinated the program. She stepped through the door and became a slightly different version of herself, sharper, more composed, the professional architecture fully engaged. I found a corner with a clean sightline to the room and stayed in it. Cal materialized beside me 20 minutes in, which was not a surprise. He'd insisted on attending the moment I told him about the gala, framing it as brotherly support and making no effort to disguise the fact that he mostly wanted to watch. He watched his sister move through the room, talking, laughing, holding a champagne flute she wasn't drinking, the composed professional version of herself running at full capacity, and then he looked at me. "She looks happy," Cal said. I watched her pause at a cluster of guests near the far end of the hall, tilt her head at something someone said, smile in a way that reached her eyes. "Yeah," I said. "She does." Cal was quiet for a moment. He had the expression he gets when he's decided something and is working out whether to say it. He's known me long enough to know I don't need him to. "You're good for her," he said finally. "For what it's worth." "It's worth something," I said. He clapped me once on the shoulder and went to find the bar. Vivian crossed the room toward me about an hour later. She moved through the crowd without hurrying, stopping once to say something to a silver-haired man who laughed and touched her elbow, and then she was in front of me, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of the coat she'd been leaving at my loft for 3 weeks. She looked up at me with those measuring eyes and said, completely seriously, "I'd like to offer you a job." "I have a job. A better one. Permanent exclusive consultant to Marceau PR strategy. Full retainer. Your own office key." She paused. "The couch in my office is better than the one at Cal's. I work for my own space." "I know. I'm offering you mine too." I looked at her for a moment. Around us the gala moved and murmured and clinked. Somewhere across the room Cal was almost certainly watching. "We should file the final report tonight," I said. "I know that too. The precinct closes at midnight." "Then we have time," she said, and took my hand. She held it there, in the middle of the Metropolitan Museum, in front of her entire professional world. Not carefully. Not quietly. The way she kissed me the night before the sting, without managing it, without measuring the cost. I let her. The precinct on West 54th was quiet at that hour, the overnight desk running at a low hum. Detective Reyes was still in, which didn't surprise me. She had the look of someone who chose her hours the same way I chose mine. We filed the supplementary report in full, the server wipe, the contract, the civil filing, the arrest. Reyes reviewed the documentation with the same expressionless efficiency she'd brought to every other interaction, signed off on the final intake, and told Vivian she'd done well. Vivian said she'd had help. Reyes looked at me with something that was almost a smile and said she was aware. Outside, the city was doing what the city does on a mild May night, exhaling. The earlier warmth still in the air, softened now by the dark, the street lamps throwing their amber light down onto wet pavement from an earlier shower I hadn't noticed. A cab rolled past. Somewhere a block over, a horn sounded once and went quiet. Vivian stopped walking. I stopped beside her. She was looking at the street for a moment, and then she turned and looked at me the way she had the first night in Cal's hallway, measuring, deciding, committing. "I'm in love with my brother's best friend," she said. "I've been trying to figure out when that happened and I think it was somewhere around the second evening with the Thai food, but I can't be certain. She paused. I don't care who knows. I looked at her in the amber light, the loose pieces of blonde hair at her jaw, the red suit traded now for black, 3 weeks of Thai food and chamomile and whiskey and careful, close work between us, and a problem solved so completely it had become something else entirely. Reyes already suspects, I said. She laughed, and I pulled her close, and I kissed her on the sidewalk with the cars rolling past and a cab honking somewhere in the warm May dark. I fix things for a living. Systems, networks, compromised data. I'm good at it. But standing there on that sidewalk, her hand in mine, the case closed and the city moving around us the way it always does, I wasn't protecting a system. For once, I was choosing a person. And that, I can tell you, is the better work. Thanks for watching. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories about love, resilience, and second chances.